They chained her, branded her, and sold her like she was nothing, just property. She stopped believing she had a name, a voice, a soul. But the day a human stepped forward and refused to treat her like an object, everything changed. He didn't see chains, he saw a broken girl who deserved freedom. And instead of calling her property, he whispered one word that shattered her walls: sister. That single choice would spark a bond stronger than blood, and ignite a fire no master could ever extinguish. They dragged her onto the stage with iron cuffs clamped around her wrists and ankles, the metal so heavy she stumbled at every step. The crowd gathered in the marketplace roared and shouted bids as the auctioneer lifted her chin with a cruel grip, tilting her face to the torchlight. Her hair was tangled and dusty, her wide alien eyes glistening with shame, and her torn garment clung to her trembling form. To them she wasn't a person, she was property, a thing to be traded, a living body with no identity beyond the number burned into her collar. She kept her gaze low because looking at them made her stomach twist. Years of captivity had taught her to accept one truth: no one would ever see her as more than a possession. Then, through the noise of the crowd, a human voice cut through, not shouting a price, not calling her an object, but speaking low and steady, as if he was seeing her for the first time. The voice belonged to a man in worn clothes, his shoulders straight, his expression unflinching. He didn't look like the wealthy buyers or the armored guards. He looked like someone who didn't belong there. And yet when his eyes locked with hers, she felt something strange, something she had almost forgotten: hope. The auctioneer barked insults at him when his bid fell short of the others. The human didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice, just placed every coin he owned on the wooden table. The crowd laughed at his foolishness. The auctioneer sneered, ready to wave him off. But when the alien girl's knees buckled and she collapsed on the stage floor, the human stepped forward, catching her weight before the guards could strike her. The crowd gasped at the audacity. Touching what wasn't yet his was punishable. Yet his grip was not cruel. He held her steady, shielded her with his own body, and in that moment silence spread over the jeering crowd. Against the rules, against the mockery, the auctioneer gave a begrudging nod. The girl was his now. She waited for the command, the order, the usual cruelty that came when ownership changed hands. Instead, he simply loosened her shackles with shaking hands, as if afraid of hurting her further. She stared at him with disbelief. "Why?" she whispered, her voice raw from silence. "Because no one deserves chains," he said quietly. The words pierced her chest. He guided her away from the stage and through the stunned marketplace until the shouting faded behind them. She expected him to drag her like the others had, but instead he matched his pace to hers, steady, patient, as if she mattered. In the small shelter he called home, he gave her food, real food, not scraps tossed in the dirt. She devoured it hungrily, hands shaking as tears stung her eyes. He didn't laugh at her desperation, didn't shame her for eating like an animal. He only waited until she calmed, and then placed a blanket over her shoulders. She whispered again, "What am I to you?" His answer stunned her. "You're my sister now." She froze, unable to comprehend the word. Sister. No one had ever called her that. Not slave, not property, not number. Sister. It wasn't just kindness, it was identity, belonging, family. At first she resisted. She didn't believe him. She flinched when he reached for her hand, braced herself for blows that never came. She expected chains to return, commands to follow, punishment to fall. Instead, he taught her how to speak her own name again. He told her stories of his childhood, of the sister he had lost years ago to the war, and she realized why he looked at her with such pain and tenderness. He wasn't replacing her, he was honoring her. Slowly, her body learned to stop trembling at his approach, her voice grew steadier, and her heart began to heal. But the world outside didn't change overnight. People spat at them in the streets, called him a fool for wasting his coin on a worthless creature. They hissed and sneered. That's property, not family. Yet every time, he stood between her and their cruelty. "She's my sister," he said without hesitation, his voice carrying a conviction that silenced even the cruelest tongues. It wasn't just protection, it was defiance. He wasn't only giving her a place in his life, he was challenging the very lie that had enslaved her. Nights were the hardest. She would wake screaming from nightmares of chains and fire, trembling in the dark. Every time he was there. Not with anger, not with impatience, but with steady presence, whispering, "You're safe. No one will hurt you here." Slowly, she began to believe it. She learned to smile again, to laugh, to lift her head without fear. The bruises faded, the scars remained, but her spirit began to bloom. The turning point came when one of her former masters tracked them down, demanding she be returned. He called her property, raised a whip, and promised to drag her back to the markets. She froze in terror, expecting to be handed over, expecting kindness to end. Instead, the human stepped forward, placing himself between her and the whip. His fists clenched, his voice steady. "She's not yours. She's my sister." The master laughed, striking anyway, but the blow never reached her. The human fought, not for ownership, but for her freedom. Though wounded and outmatched, his will was unbreakable. When the master fell and fled in shame, she collapsed into his arms, weeping not from fear but from the realization that he would bleed for her. From that day forward, she no longer saw herself as broken. She began to stand taller, to claim her place beside him. People still whispered, still mocked, but they could no longer erase the truth. She was not property. She was not nameless. She was his sister, and in that bond she discovered strength she never knew she had. Together they faced a world built on cruelty, and together they defied it, not with hatred, but with the simple, unshakable truth of chosen family. Because in a galaxy that called her less than nothing, one human refused to let her be forgotten. He didn't give her freedom as a gift, he gave her back herself. And though chains had once defined her, now a single word redefined her life forever. Sister.